This video narration may include elements that some might find disturbing. Viewers and/or listeners' discretion is advised. Is this thing broken? From 2008 to 2009, I served as an infantry team leader for the U.S. Army in the Kunar province of Afghanistan. During a night observation patrol to surveil a village, which we suspected to be a source of IEDs based on a previous successful IED recovery operation, my team settled in the area. At that moment, my lieutenant issued me a new thermal imaging system, Recon 3, that none of us were familiar with. He instructed me to conduct an assessment of its functionalities and disseminate the acquired knowledge to the rest of the team leaders. I spent hours messing with the Recon 3 and was amazed by its clarity and zoom capability. It was incredible. I couldn't resist exploring its different functionalities while observing the village. It was a chance for me to learn more about Recon 3 and how it could help us better execute our mission. While experimenting with the Recon 3, I noticed something odd. An anomalous thermal signature emanating from a specific location within the mountain range. Based on my perspective that night, there seemed to be individuals huddled together in that area of the mountain. This raised suspicion that something was happening there. Although the exact nature of the object was unclear, I conveyed my observations to my superior officer and apprised the other team leaders of the situation. Following a brief deliberation, it was decided that continued surveillance of the identified area was warranted to ascertain any further developments. The next night, as I continued to scan the valley using the Recon 3, I shifted my focus along the spur we were set in on and noticed a conspicuous heat signature at the peak of a false summit. I suspected again to be a gathering of Taliban fighters. As I made every effort to obtain a clearer image, the heat signature rose up, revealing what seems to be a being that towered above the surrounding 10 to 12-foot trees. Is this thing broken? I muttered to myself. Upon a second glance, the entity moved at an alarming rate across the terrain, taking massive strides. Its movement was so quick that I lost sight of it as it disappeared behind a nearby ridge. I never reported what I saw that night, as I was in disbelief and initially assumed it to be a figment of my imagination or hallucination due to combat fatigue. Furthermore, I was aware that reporting a sighting of a 15-foot being in the mountains could lead to ridicule and disbelief. The following day, my team received an order, a search and rescue operation. The details of the mission were as follows. A friendly infantry unit disappeared during their patrol in the Kandahar mountain range. The unit ceased radio communication, and they did not call in a TIC, troops in contact, or any other form of communication. The absence of such a signal was unusual, and it was perplexing that a unit would just disappeared without any indication of an engagement. The objective was clear: locate the missing infantry and relay any discovered information to our commanding officer. My team was transported by helicopters to the Kandahar mountain range, approximately 4 clicks or 4 kilometers from where the missing infantry unit was last seen. We conducted a methodical search of the mountainside, being mindful of enemy presence and the possibility of an ambush due to the presence of cave systems in the area. Despite carrying a heavy load of gear, we made slow progress over the first few days without encountering any signs of the missing unit or hostiles. We came across a well-developed goat trail leading up the mountain and decided to head up the trail, hoping to gain a vantage point on the other side of the mountain and perhaps spot anything of interest. We proceeded with caution as we made our way up the trail. Upon commencing our ascent up the mountain, our team immediately observed scattered pieces of American military equipment on the ground, including whip antennas, radio housings, military-style backpacks, and uniform pieces. The patches on the uniform allowed us to identify them. These came from the missing infantry unit. Just a few clicks up the trail, we saw scattered and broken bones along the way to the plateau. Our extensive training immediately kicked in, and we became acutely aware of the dangerous situation we were in. We hypothesized that the infantry unit had been ambushed, and we were probably approaching the ambush site. In response, we proceeded up the mountain slowly and with extreme caution, taking defensive positions and keeping our weapons pointed at the leading edge. Upon reaching the plateau, we discovered more equipment and bones scattered across the area. There were also several cave entrances located in a strategic position that fed out onto the plateau. As we moved towards the cave entrances, we realized that they were quite large, but there was a steep drop-off inside, and we could not see how far it went down. Given the tattered uniforms and equipment found earlier, we decided that it was too risky to enter the caves. We executed a tactical retreat, taking up defensive positions with our eyes fixed on the entrance to the cave. I signaled my men to move in, and we slowly walked towards the cave, guns up, locked, and loaded. I had my sights trained on one of the entrances when suddenly a flash of movement inside caught my attention. Before I could react, a spear was hurled out of the cave and impaled one of my men. Dan! The shock of the attack left us all stunned as a colossal 13 to 15-foot man with a fire-orange beard and hair down to his shoulders charged out of the cave, letting out a deafening war cry. The creature, donned in animal skins, appeared to be extremely unkempt and unclean. Despite his size, he moved with surprising agility. It swiftly approached Dan to retrieve the spear and possibly use it again. However, my team sprang into action, engaging the giant in combat. In a matter of seconds, the giant fell to our team's superior training and tactics. The aftermath of the battle left us all in disbelief and shock, as we tried to make sense of what had just occurred. We checked on Dan, only to find that he had succumbed to his injuries. We immediately called back to headquarters to provide a detailed account of the event, explaining that a large, possibly human creature had thrown a projectile that had resulted in the loss of one of our own. After the operation, our team was airlifted out by 2 helicopters, one to retrieve our team and Dan, and the other to lift the giant creature. The military had a keen interest in identifying the creature, and their attempts to secure its massive body were met with great difficulty. Weighing over 1,100 pounds, the creature had 6 toes on each foot and 6 fingers on each hand. The helicopter carrying the creature then flew to an airfield to rendezvous with a crew of a C-130. The pilot of the C-130 publicly confirmed the sighting of the 13 to 15-foot tall giant creature with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. However, the statement was later redacted and made top secret. Once back at the base, we were required to provide an after-action report. Our team decided to be forthcoming about the creature's physical description and its spear-throwing attack that killed Dan. However, our leadership demanded a rewrite of the report to make it sound like a routine engagement with the enemy. The report was then classified top secret, and we were all required to sign non-disclosure agreements, prohibiting us from ever discussing what we had witnessed. Unfortunately, we never received any further information on what happened to the body of the giant creature. The entire incident was shrouded in secrecy, and we were instructed not to speak of it again. During my time in service, I didn't speak much about what I saw, both while I was in and even after I got out. I kept it to myself. But then in 2010, I listened to a story on Coast to Coast Radio about the giant of Kandahar, and it brought back all the memories of my deployment. I can say that the creature I saw was quite striking, and it left an impression on me. The fire-orange hair that it had reminded me of a local tradition in the area of my sighting, where the locals would dye their hair and goats in bright orange without any explanation. I initially assumed it was a cultural thing that I didn't understand. But now I wonder if it was some kind of gesture to the creature, or if the goats were sacrificed to it. As a Christian, I can't help but recall the brief mention of the men of renown, or the Nephilim, in the Bible. I think that's what I saw, a member of an ancient race of giants that descended from fallen angels. Or probably Sasquatch. They can't let it go. Our family had always been a tight-knit unit. We enjoyed spending time together, laughing and making memories that we would cherish forever. Christmas had always been our favorite holiday, and in 2013 we were all excited to see the joy on my daughter's face when she received my gift. An Elsa doll from the Disney film Frozen. For the first 2 years, everything was normal. The doll would recite phrases from the movie Frozen and sing "Let It Go" in English. We didn't think much of it since it was just a toy. But in 2015, things started to change. Weird stuff started happening in our home. Doors would often open and close on their own. Lights would flicker on and off, and the TV would sometimes turn on automatically. It was all very strange, but what really caught our attention was the Elsa doll. One day we noticed that the doll had started speaking and singing in Spanish, even though there was no button to change the language. We were all confused and a little scared, but we all shrugged it off as just a glitch. For 4 years, the strange occurrences around our house grew more frequent and intense. We would wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of the doll singing in Spanish, even though we had turned it off. It was as if the doll had a mind of its own, and we were powerless to stop it. We never tried to change its batteries, but kept on talking and singing in Spanish. This happens even when it's turned off. We tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. So in 2019, we tried to get rid of it by throwing it into the garbage bin outside the house. Back then, I thought that was that. But a couple of days later, we found the doll on a wooden chair inside the house. When I saw the doll, it felt like cold water was poured over me. Scared and a little bit angry, I double-bagged the stupid doll and put it at the bottom of the trash can. But just like what happened the first time, we saw the doll again. This time it was in the backyard. The next thing we tried was to throw it directly into a garbage truck. I was sure that there was no way this doll can come back to us. But I was wrong, because the next day the doll was waiting outside our door. Every time we thought we had gotten rid of the doll, it would come back. It was like a bad dream that we couldn't escape from. The worst part was that every time the doll was at our house, the strange occurrences happening there also escalates. We would now hear footsteps in the hallway when no one was there, and doors would not just shut, they would slam on their own. It was as if the doll had unleashed something in our home, something that was determined to make our lives a living hell. We were desperate for help, but we didn't know who to turn to. That's when I remembered my friend Hogan from Minnesota. I called Hogan, told him what was happening, and he agreed to help me. I mailed the doll to Hogan with no return address. Miraculously, Hogan received the doll after a couple of days. He immediately brought the doll to his garage and taped it to the brush guard of his Jeep. He then called me stating what he did and jokingly said, "If anything weird happens, I'm welding this thing into a steel pipe and sinking it in Lake of the Woods." Since then, the doll never returned to Houston. I'm relieved that I'll never see that cursed doll again. But I'm still scared, thinking that it may return someday. Days had passed since we had gotten rid of the Elsa doll, and the whole family seemed to be returning to normal and was beginning to let it go when we heard a loud boom. It was one of our bedroom doors, and it slammed on its own, again. And until this day, the strange occurrence inside our house did not stop. And I'm left with questions in mind. Did that doll bring something evil into our home? Or maybe it was never the doll in the first place, but something else. We would be grateful if you could help us out by smashing the like and subscribe buttons. Your support would mean the world to our small channel, and we promise to continuously improve our content to keep you coming back for more. So thanks in advance, and now let's get on to our next story. Our next story is called My Dearest Comrade. This tale I recount is of my dearest comrade, Samuel. a man whose friendship I held close to my heart. From the days of our youth to our shared dwelling in college, we were as brothers, bound by an unbreakable bond. Laughter and mirth accompanied us as we gallivanted through our days, at times indulging in revelry and intoxicating spirits, simply savoring life's pleasures. Together we were inseparable, two souls intertwined. Alas, fate took its turn when I embarked upon a path of service to king and country, donning the uniform of the British Indian Army as a lieutenant general. My duty necessitated my departure from home, leaving behind my cherished friend. Before parting ways, Samuel vowed to visit me in due time, an assurance that brought solace to my heart. Years slipped away like sand through an hourglass, yet no tidings reached my ears from Samuel. Until one fateful morning, amidst the walls of my station in Myuu, Burma, the unexpected occurred. Emerging from my bedchamber, I was in the midst of donning my attire when a familiar countenance strode into the room. A gasp escaped my lips as I recognized none other than Samuel himself. "Sam!" I exclaimed in astonishment, unable to contain my surprise at his sudden appearance. Eager to exchange words with my long-lost friend, I implored him to summon a servant and prepare a cup of tea upon the veranda. Assuring him that I would swiftly join him, I hurriedly dressed myself and hastened towards the outdoor sanctuary. To my dismay, as I reached the veranda, there stood no trace of Samuel. I scoured the surroundings, casting my gaze upon every nook and cranny, but he was nowhere to be found. Perplexed, I beckoned the sentries stationed at the front of the house, questioning if they had observed any unfamiliar gentleman that morning. Yet their response proved fruitless, for they claimed no knowledge of Samuel's presence. The household staff echoed this sentiment, asserting that no such visitor had graced our threshold. Nevertheless, I remained resolute in my conviction that my eyes had beheld the visage of my dear friend. Perhaps he had departed, I pondered, for Myuu's harbor teemed with steamers and vessels incessantly traversing its waters. It was plausible that Samuel had merely passed by, ensconced within one such vessel. My spirit yearned for his company, eager to exchange stories and rekindle our camaraderie. However, I surmise that it shall remain deferred for another time. 4 interminable nights elapsed, and a missive arrived, bearing the weight of sorrowful tidings. My heart plummeted as I discovered that Samuel had departed this mortal realm. Grief, like an engulfing tempest, seized hold of my being. Regret gnawed at my soul, for I had yearned to converse with my cherished companion before his untimely demise, yet he had vanished without delay. With a heavy heart, I completed the reading of the letter, only to be confronted by an appalling revelation. Samuel's passing occurred some 600 miles distant from my location on the very same date that I beheld his apparition within my chamber. The inexplicable nature of this event left me perplexed, haunted by the specter of an encounter with a departed friend. I recount this tale of friendship and loss, forever etched in the annals of my military service. The specter of Samuel's ghostly visitation lingers within my memories, a reminder of true friendship and the unfathomable mysteries that lie beyond the veil of our world. Our next story is called The Old Wine Box. As a curator at a university museum, I have a deep passion for antiques, particularly those with fascinating backstories. While I rely on science to explain most things in my life, something inexplicable happened to me that can't be explained by science or logic. It all began with a peculiar eBay listing for an antique wine box that immediately caught my attention. As I read through the item description, I discovered that the box contained some bizarre objects, including a penny, locks of hair, a wine cup, a slab of granite with some weird engraving, and a dried flower. But what really intrigued me was the seller's claim that the box was cursed, and that the owner could potentially experience insect infestation, sickness, hallucinations, nightmares, and other inexplicable occurrences. This was explained in full detail under the description box. Despite my initial reservations, I couldn't resist placing a bid on the box. The bid started at $1, but to my surprise, a bidding war quickly ensued, and I ultimately won the box for almost $300. I couldn't believe that there were others out there who shared my fascination with such a bizarre and unsettling item. As I eagerly awaited the arrival of the wine box, I couldn't help but wonder about its history and the stories behind each of the mysterious objects contained within it. I felt so excited at the prospect of uncovering its secrets. A few days later, the package containing the wine box finally arrived at the museum. Due to a busy workday, I decided to store the package in my truck until I could properly examine it later. As soon as the office cleared out for the day, I quickly retrieved the package and brought it up to my office. After carefully placing it on my desk, I eagerly cut open the packaging and began my evaluation of the wine box. As a museum curator, I wanted to approach the wine box with the same level of scrutiny as any other artifact. I meticulously took photos of the exterior and used a black light to inspect for any unusual markings. I soon discovered traces of wax that suggested the box may have been used in some sort of ritual. During my examination, I felt this overwhelming urge to open the box, so I sat down in front of the box, unlocked it, took a deep breath, and opened it. But to my disappointment, nothing happened. I had been expecting some sort of paranormal activity, but the wine box seemed like any other ordinary antique. Inside the box, I found a few mundane items, including pennies, a wine cup, a small statue, and locks of hair. As I sifted through the contents, I realized that my anticipation for a thrilling discovery had clouded my judgment. It was just an ordinary, unremarkable wine cabinet. Aside from the mysterious marking on its back, it was normal. It was all just a hoax, or so I thought. After closing the wine box, I decided to place it on another desk, in the shared office space I occupied with some colleagues. I thought it would be an interesting showpiece, or a conversation starter. The following morning, my co-workers noticed the wine box and began to ask me about it. I explained how it was supposedly haunted and how it had caused people to become sick or even have strokes. Although they found it interesting, they didn't give it much thought initially. However, after a few days, things took a strange turn. Our office electronics began to malfunction and our computers kept crashing. Even the IT department couldn't find the root of the problem. Soon after, light bulbs throughout the office started to burn out at an alarming rate, a problem we had never experienced before. It wasn't until my colleagues started getting sick that they blamed the wine box. They said that everything was fine until it came into the room. They insisted that I get rid of it. Back then, I thought they were crazy to blame a stupid box for everything that was happening in the office. I had no idea how right they were. After work that day, I put the wine box in the back of my truck and went home. I decided to leave it in the truck overnight and deal with it the next day. I went inside the house and say hi to my family. I was already exhausted from work, so I went to bed early. A few hours later, I was awoken, but my whole body was paralyzed except for my eyes, and the only thing I could see was the bright orange glow from the streetlight outside my window, casting eerie shadows on my bedroom walls. Then, I heard slow, heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. Each step echoes through the empty hallway, causing my heart to race. My eyes were fixed on the open door, waiting to see who or what is coming. It was getting closer and closer, and then I saw it. A dark figure shuffled into the room. It was an older woman with a shawl over her head, and her face was obscured. I knew right away that I didn't recognize her, and that she didn't belong in my room. She made her way across the foot of the bed, and as she turned to look at me, I could see that her eyes were empty, void of any emotion, and her face was melting. It was as if her face is being torn and ripped by some invisible force. She slowly crawled onto my bed, and on top of me. Her face is now inches from mine. Blood and chunks of her face are dripping on mine. I could swear some of them dropped on my lips. All I can hear now is my heart trying to escape my chest. She then slowly ran her fingers across my chest, to my mouth, and then my eyes. I shrieked as I felt a sharp pain in my eyes. I screamed in agony, and then I woke up. My wife was shaking me and asking me what was wrong. The dream felt too vivid to be just a figment of the imagination. Disoriented and shaken, I got up and made my way to the bathroom to splash some water on my face. As I looked into the mirror, my heart sank at the sight of my bloodshot eyes. The whites of my eyes was covered in blood. It felt as if the woman's ghostly fingers had actually gouged at them, leaving behind a disturbing mark. The nightmare lingered in my mind, leaving me with an unsettling feeling that it was a forewarning of something dreadful. I couldn't shake the feeling that an ominous force was at play. Unable to sleep, I waited restlessly for the sun to rise before heading off to work with the wine box still in my truck. That evening, I returned home to have dinner with my family. As we sat in the TV room watching, my son nervously asked, "Dad, what?" I looked at my son confused. My son nervously pointed behind me, and to my utter shock, I saw black flames flickering across the walls and ceiling before vanishing as quickly as they appeared. It was then that I began to realize the cursed nature of the wine box. The item description echoed in my mind as I recounted the vivid nightmares, physical manifestations, and hallucinations that plagued not just me, but our whole family. The wine box was clearly the source of our torment, and I knew I had to get rid of it before it was too late. The thought of just discarding the wine box on some random garbage can crossed my mind, but the fear of another unsuspecting individual falling prey to its curse filled me with guilt. As I pondered on what to do with the cursed wine box, I remembered our rental property with a wine cellar. I thought perhaps it could serve as a temporary storage for the box until I figure out a permanent solution. So I ultimately decided to bring the box there and leave it in the cellar. It was a relief to have it away from our house, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that it was only a matter of time before the box do something malevolent again. I began my thorough investigation, and it led me on an exhilarating journey of discovery. I scoured the internet, talked to previous owners, and meticulously recorded every detail in my journal, and on a website I created specifically for the box. The most crucial information came from Ken, the elusive second owner of the box. Initially hesitant, Ken finally agreed to help me. He drove to the house where he had purchased the box years ago. There, he met Sonia, the sister of the original owner, who had warned her family never to sell it and had known all along that it was not meant to be opened. Sonia revealed to Ken the terrifying truth. The wine box was actually a Dybbuk box. In Jewish mythology, a Dybbuk is a malevolent spirit that latches onto a living person's body, taking over their flesh. It's said that the Dybbuk is the soul of someone who failed to fulfill their purpose in life, most common for people who committed suicide. They are then granted another chance by becoming a Dybbuk. Once it achieves its objective, it may depart from the host's body with or without assistance. It can also be expelled or trapped inside a box using exorcism. Before World War II, Sonia lived in Poland with her sister and cousins who had an Ouija board, which they used for seances. She explained that seances were all the rage back then, and she and her family would often hold them for fun. It was all fun and games until one day, the Ouija board spelled out the words, "Release me, release me, release me," over and over again. Sonia and her family didn't take it seriously, thinking it was just a prank. But they soon realized that a spirit had indeed made contact with them and that they needed to help it. So they devised a ritual to release the spirit, but locked it away in the box to keep it from causing harm. That box was the same one I had purchased. I was stunned and ironically pleased with the purchase I made. I've always loved antiques with a rich backstory, but this one was dark beyond my wildest imagination. Sonia warned us that if we wanted to put an end to the hauntings, we needed to contact a rabbi and find a way to trap the dybbuk back inside the box. A sudden sense of clarity washed over me as I knew exactly what I needed to do. Without hesitation, I rushed out of my house to find a rabbi. But as soon as I opened the door, I was met with a tall man in a black suit who extended his hand for a handshake.
"Hi, my name is Peter," he said. "I'm a lawyer and my client would like to buy the rights to make a filmed version of your story."
Let's talk. Thanks for tuning in to Enigmatic Episodes and for lending us your ears as we shared these spine-tingling tales. If you have any suggestions for topics or stories, or if you have a real-life creepy experience of your own to share, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below or connect with us on our Facebook account. All of our social media links are in the description box. We value each and every one of our listeners, and we read all of your messages, so feel free to drop us a line, and we'll do our best to reply. That's it for this week. We'll be back with more spooky stories next week. Again, my name is Lucas, and you've been listening to Enigmatic Episodes. Thank you so much.